Hey, it's your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. Zooming in on a brief yet concise documentary on narcissistic personality disorder. The origins of this disorder, really as a kind of a synthesis and taken from the works of a wonderful author named Mr. John Bradshaw. He has written two wonderful books, including Healing the Shame That Binds You and Homecoming, Reclaiming and Champion the Inner Child. So two books I would definitely highly recommend for you. And I want to take a brief excerpt, or basically just discuss really some important key topics that I feel that really can help clarify and explain to you really the origin of narcissistic personality disorder, as well as really some of the foundations of the victimization, or the feeling of victimization or victimhood that occurs in those people who encounter this type of personality disordered individual. And Mr. John Bradshaw really elaborates into a core foundation of a concept called shame. Shame is the inner sense that somehow you're internally flawed. Something is wrong with you, something is not right, something is off. And it's a pervasive feeling, meaning it's carried into everyday activities for this person. And really, shame can be originated within faulty family systems. So really, that's kind of the cause and starting point to a child, to a person, when they're growing and evolving in this world. And he really elaborates really on how this is created. How this is set up in the individual. And if you're interested in it, I would highly recommend you looking at more of his books. But I really want you to understand just how it plays out in terms of narcissistic personality disorder. Shame is, since it erodes away basically one's self-esteem, it creates a vacuous feeling, a feeling of emptiness, a feeling of insecurity, inferiority. And this feeling is thought to really create a number of issues. And number one here, it's going to create, I don't know if you can see that, but essentially a false self. The marker isn't very strong here, but essentially the false self is what the narcissist projects into the world. So whether they're charming, whether they pretend to be successful, whether they pretend to be happy, whether they pretend to have a lot of sexual relationships, what have you. Shame is thought to be one of the originators, which requires the development, basically the creation of a false self. So inside, we all have a true, authentic self, one that is rooted in a sense of self-esteem, sort of a contentment, a peace, the real self that feels safe in the world, that doesn't feel inhibited, that does not feel ashamed. So that is the authentic self. That's essentially what we come into the world with. However, if we interact with diseased, disordered parents, specifically those that also possess shame, I don't know if you can see that. If we are raised by people who have shame, they in turn project that shame onto their children and create a sense of embarrassment, humility, for their needs, for their very being. So they disrupt that authentic self. So for the child to adapt, they create what's called a false self. And so that false self is then what interacts with the world. And all the while, internally, they feel there's something else within them that's hidden, that they can't really express. It gets kind of shoved down, more or less. That is the authentic self. And it's the authentic true self that is really crying and desiring for experience later in life. So the narcissist is thought to create a very pronounced false self, which they bring into all their activities, and it creates a very sort of aggression and hurtful, selfish, driving sort of personality, all while repressing really their authentic self, which is really at the core of shame, insecurity, all those sort of things that we feel really are driving the narcissist, someone who is not able to get away from their false self. They're always utilizing their false self. They're never really coming in terms with their authentic self. And it's also thought by John Bradshaw that that it's that shame underneath that creates a feeling of codependency, which means the feeling that you have to take care of other people. You can't really feel comfortable taking care of yourself, that there's always someone else's needs who are going to basically be more important than yours. And so, for example, in a lot of dysfunctional family systems, if we see an alcoholic parent or a sick parent or personality disordered parent, oftentimes the child feels responsibility to take care of them and their needs really before their time. So they're parenting and they never really get a chance to experience a sense of childhood and their authentic self. So that really creates what is called a codependent sort of identity or a personality, where rather than being safe and comfortable and them having their needs met and being able to then reciprocate with others, they take a subservient role and constantly taking care of others as their identity. And it really becomes a problem when shame becomes the core of one's identity. In other words, it's shame rather than empowerment that is fueling a person, their activities, their thoughts, their behaviors, their emotions. Shame is the undergirding source rather than a sense of self-esteem, true personal power, connection to a higher source, what have you, your creator, so to speak. So really that's the goal of empowerment, is learning to shed that shamed self, that feeling that we're internally flawed, the shame that feels, the self that feels flawed, and really realizing that is was instilled in error or instilled by character disordered people who delivered the wrong message, and really getting back to the core of empowerment, which is a self that is authentic and not feeling flawed, because that is the truth and that is the reality. He's also believed to have thought that shame-based personality creates that borderline personality disorder as well. So, someone who is very emotionally unstable, someone who is all in black or white thinking. It's all or nothing with them. If you're not in agreement with them, they're just going to flip out. They're going to turn a 180, a nuclear explosion on you, and you're not being able to match terms there. It's also thought that the shame is also at the core of all addiction. So this is John Bradshaw's idea. In other words, alcoholism, drug abuse, sexual addictions, things of this nature, they're all sourced by an internal feeling of shame, or somehow that person is flawed in some way. So really it's an identity where one feels flawed that is really the causation of much of these disorders, problems that create, huge amounts of pain, low productivity, financial messes, things of this nature, excessive healthcare utilization, and really, can oftentimes be prevented and dealt with once we realize the core of that. He also feels that shame is the core of the character disorders, specifically narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. So knowing that to be the case, if you have encountered, as we're discussing it and delving into here in this channel, Peace and Harmony, that you have encountered the being victimized by someone with narcissistic personality disorder, someone who is abusive, someone who is extremely selfish, someone who is not acknowledging you, someone who is not understanding or meeting your needs, feelings, recognition. They're basically toxic in all these sort of methods. They're hurtful to you. They're shaming you. So in other words, again, they're utilizing that projection of their internal shame, their feeling of being flawed. They're inflicting that onto you when in essence you are not flawed. So I want you to understand really some of the origins really that are thought to create some of the devastation, and really remember that it is not one's intention to be living in a state of feeling less than, flawed, victimized, because the victim mentality, once all this cycles on, especially chronically, is very destructive, and it becomes very crippling. and very dysfunctional, and really is the cause of a lot of what is called neuroses and things of that nature. So really realize that the narcissistic personality in your life who is striving and has an excessive need for admiration to the exclusion of others, that oftentimes it's a shame base within them that is fueling them and driving them. And as Sam Vatkin has said, that they're like a narcissistic is like an alcoholic. They have a compulsion to do this. So it's not anything you can really deter, change. In fact, oftentimes, the best resolve really is to realize that that's how that person is, and to get up the courage and get up the strength to let them go. Even though that might be hard, even though it might be painful, even though it might not make sense that this should be, that you feel that you have so much love and you have so much understanding and heart and empathy that you should be able to resolve this, or resolve a relationship. Oftentimes, one's will to overcome that for them is not enough. One must, realize that you must clear yourself of these people and, really learn to vindicate them, clear them from your life, so that you can go ahead and, live your destiny. Because oftentimes if you get, stuck with these people, you're not going to be able to live your true authentic self, and you're not going to be able to pursue your own destiny, which means fulfill your calling, fulfill your purpose, fulfill your talents, fulfill your gifts. You're not going to be able to, express these because you're so caught up in living as a victim of the narcissist. So it really, it becomes really an identity to become a victim of these people. So the codependent is very much, formed an identity serving the narcissist. So they're missing out on their true calling, their true purpose, their true destiny. So if you can, and if you're watching this, please try to identify this cycle within your life, within your relationships, and identify then that your calling, your purpose, your destiny is to be your true authentic self, not the victim self, not the shame self, not the self that the narcissist has inflicted upon you, all their wounds that they have inflicted upon you through projection and their defense mechanisms. You are meant to live your true authentic self, one of happiness, one of fulfillment, one of personal growth, one of personal expansion and enhancement, and the positive emotions, and so not the flawed self. So please look to that identification and make all your focus on fulfilling that, your purpose, your true destiny, which is victorious, and not that as projected by the narcissist. Peace and harmony with you here today. I hope these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe. Help those people in need. And please do stay tuned for more great videos, discussions, tools, and support.